He was over here on Friday and Saturday because he loves fishing. So I'll take him fishing. And he's like, "You still have this?" And I was like, "I do." I was like, "I never throw away what you guys give me. Like you're my nephews, you know." Right. So cool. Well, thank you, Tania, for coming on the podcast and taking time out of your busy life, being a wife and a mom and doing things. And go ahead and introduce yourself. So your camera is the far one over there. Okay. Just introduce yourself. Let people know who you are, what you do, passionate, all the things.
Yeah. So, I'm Tania, and I am a mom of 2 teenage boys who are my everything. I'm born a boy's mom, for sure. So I love being boy mom. I love all the messy things, all the adventures. I do think it's easier in some ways.
Having boys.
Yeah. People. Just last night, I was at a graduation party and someone said, "Oh, it's so much easier you have boys," and I was like, "Yeah, but it is different. I mean, it's just different.
Yeah.
It's got its own challenges, but yeah." Have 2 teenage boys. One just graduated. Very fun. Entering into a new phase of life.
Yep.
And that's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
There was some tears, but they're more like tears of like
joy.
It's not really sadness. It's more like when I was like reflecting, I was like, man, why is this like so impactful? And my conclusion is it's because this is a moment where it's 100% defined as a transition.
Yeah.
Like I felt like most transitions you just kind of ease through. This one's like boom in your face, transition time.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh. So yeah. Wrote a book last year.
Yeah, and we're gonna get into that. I'm super excited.
That's been great and just really great to talk about and give to people and spread the word about it. Yeah. And yeah.
Cool. I love it. That's awesome. Yeah. I remember when I graduated, my mom cried because there were a lot of people who thought I was not going to graduate. I was just like, I was a troubled kid growing up, but when I graduated, everybody was like, oh,
Yeah.
But so your son it was a trade school.
Yeah. He went through a career center and
yeah.
So he's like off to a great start.
Yep.
Like a head start, if you will.
Yep. Yeah, I did a trade school as well. It was a TCTC, Trumbull County Technical Center up near like Youngstown.
Okay.
Is originally where I'm from. So I was an average D student all through high school, maybe more so probably closer to like the F range. Yeah. But when I went to the trade school, because it was the last 2 years of high school, I don't know if they still do it that way.
Junior and senior year, yeah.
Yep. When I went in my junior and senior year, immediately shot up to like B's and A's, and I did so well on my senior year, I didn't have to take any final testing. All my teachers came out to me like, "Hey, you've excelled in all of these areas.
That's
like
awesome.
You don't have to take the final testing to graduate." Yep. And I was like, "Oh my God." It was like me and 6 or 7 other kids who didn't have to do it. So we just went to school, hung out. Like it was incredible. But the hands-on learning is what really excelled me. Instead of just sitting in class and hearing someone talk, it was all hands-on.
Yep.
So that helped me develop as well. Is like, I'm a hands-on learner. Like I have to do it to learn it. And so, yeah, I'm a huge fan.
Yeah. And I went the career path. I went to school for cosmetology and did hair for several years. So we're a huge trade alternative route is what I would call it.
Yeah. Yep. And it sets you up as soon as you graduate. You have the credits, you have the experience, immediately higher paying job.
Yep.
And yeah, I'm a huge fan of trade schools or tech schools or whatever they're called. So very fun. So tell me a little bit about your life before we get into the book. I want people to know, like, who is Tania?
Yeah.
What would you say your life journey is, and what does it look like?
I would say quirky.
Okay.
Eclectic. Yeah. I like a little of everything.
Okay.
Love color, though I don't always dress in it, but I like to use it.
This is my color. Like I wear black everything. Like I love color too. I try to use vibrant colors in my creativity, but as far as clothes go, I'm an all black guy.
Yeah.
Like just It's simple. I don't have to think about what I'm going to wear. I just wake up, throw black clothes on, and I'm good.
Yeah. I've experienced a lot of turmoil and chaos throughout my childhood.
Okay.
Just a lot of obstacles, from family dynamics to school dynamics, bullies, just a lot of things that would try to write a different narrative than the one I'm currently living in, and just really push and suppress. And so there's been a lot of triumphs, a lot of fall and get back up again kind of moments. But it's been, through it all, like art's been my go-to, if you will.
Okay.
Or some sort of creative outlet, like whatever that might be. When I was younger, I can't remember what the show was called now. Kind of like now it's like, there's American Idol and there's all these different like subcategories. But at the time I forget what the show was, but I used to watch it and I was like, I want to be a fashion model. And then I want to do fashion and I want to do clothes and all these things. But I was always kind of drawing and sketching things.
Okay.
And, kind of reflecting back, it's like, I think those were the moments where I could kind of escape what was the chaos of my life. And so still there's these like creative elements that kind of held things together. Yeah. Kind of shed light in spaces and but it was tough, and so kind of like you said about the Career Center for you, I was not a great student. Education or reading was really hard for me. Okay. Like comprehension, I could tell a story, I could write something, but to read it was really, really rough. Yeah. And so the journey to get through all that kind of school stuff, and like math ended up being challenged at a time. But when I went to the Career Center, all of a sudden, like all my grades changed. Like it was like I found something worth like pushing through. Yeah. And just made more sense. Yeah. And so it came more natural to me. It had that creative element. It had expression. It had a way I could help people. Okay. And so I did hair for several years. And then when I started having kids, I did hair out of my house while I helped, raise them and ended up homeschooling. Okay. So it was like, doing hair was a great tool to help kind of supplement some income while, educating my kids, which was its own journey. I never intended to homeschool. It was something that I felt the Lord called me to do. I remember distinctly sitting outside one day. I was like, we decided to do, not get on the preschool bandwagon of like, this is what you got to do and this is the route you got to go. And so I said, I can do that. I'll get some workbooks and we'll do it casually. Like it's preschool. Yeah. Like how do you mess that up? Yeah. And so I would just remember sitting outside one day and he's doing his little stuff. And I was like, is this what homeschooling could be like? And I was like, whoa, what was that? That was not my thought. Like that is because my husband grew up homeschooled. Okay. And it wasn't that I was against it. It was more I was against me doing it. Yeah. Not against the idea of it. Yeah. I was just like, I'm not cut out for that.
That's funny.
And I did it for 6 years. Okay.
So a good while.
Yeah.
That's fun. What so you mentioned like family dynamics. What was that like growing up?
Yeah, it was my mom, my brother, and my dad, who later in life I would find out was more like a stepdad who had adopted me when I was a baby. Okay. So I had half siblings, and the environment was a bit chaotic. There were drugs involved, and there was money issues, and lots of kind of a family that was accustomed to sweeping things under the rug. Okay. And at some point, as like a fourth grader who was going through kind of some court stuff and different things with the family, that I was like, I started to use my voice more. And really now looking back, realize it was more of a time where I believe I was like in a space where I was supposed to help break the sweeping it under the rug.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's over, people.
Yeah.
But so many generations before had just either oblivious to things going on in family dynamics or turn the other cheek, other eye, you can turn away. And I just didn't have that in me.
Do you think if you can remember, was there like a moment, even being a child, like mentally or recognizing that you had to make different choices and different actions to change the trajectory of how you wanted your life to look like?
I think that it kind of organically happened. I don't know that I, woke up one day and was like, you know what? I've had enough of this.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was exhaustion, honestly.
Yeah.
Of being in a state of survival, that I just started to share things that was happening.
Yeah.
And out of that, it was like a ball started rolling that just couldn't stop.
Yeah.
And so now we're just letting it all out.
Yeah.
And so
which can be great moments.
Yeah.
It can be chaotic, but it can also be very freeing when, again, I like that you use the word exhaustion, because I feel like that's where people just eventually come to when they're just done.
Yeah.
Like they're just tired of everything. They want to experience something different. And I know I've had a few of those moments.
Yeah.
I'm probably currently in one right now, but I'm just exhausted. Something has got to change. And that's fascinating. So when did you find out that you were adopted?
I was in 7th grade.
Okay. How did that take effect?
Yeah. I had that father of mine, he had been incarcerated.
Okay.
And we had been writing letters back and forth, and he had said some things that I just knew weren't true, accusations of my mom. And my mom was taking me to soccer practice one night, and I was just like in a mood, and she was like, "What's wrong?" And I was like, threw the letter at her, and she read it while I was at practice. And when she came to get me, she said, "I have something to tell you." Okay. And we had said that we would tell you together, but he doesn't have that right anymore. Okay. And so she hauled around so much that I was like, out with it already. Yeah. Like I kind of felt like I knew what she was going to say, or maybe I was hoping that's what she'd say. I'm not really sure. Okay. I was in 7th grade. Yeah. But
was it a weighty thing for you? Or was it
it freeing? Felt freeing. Like so much of my life makes sense now. Okay. Like from whatever grade where you're really starting to, why am I like I am? And why do I maybe not look like, this part of the family or this or that? Yeah. I was like, everything I think it might make sense now. Okay. Like little dumb things that you think as a kid, like, why am I left-handed and no one else is? Yeah. Or why am I the tallest one? And so she initiated, would you want to meet him and all this, and I can reach out and see if I can find him. Okay. And so my biological dad knew I existed. It wasn't like anything, but there had been no contact for,
pretty
until
much
then.
Your entire life.
And so it was one of those high school moments that just kind of rerouted their whole lives. Okay. And so,
and you've met your biological dad?
Yep. I have a relationship with him. Okay. He's great. When I met him, literally so much made sense. Yeah. I was like, from like body composition to little quirky things that I do, I was like, whoa, that's really true. Like some things just are in your DNA. Like I tilt my head like that, like just bizarre things that were not taught. Okay. And I was like, whoa, this is bizarre. Yeah. And so I've had an ongoing relationship with him, and he lives in another state. And so we see each other maybe once a year. Okay. When I was younger, I would go there during the summer. Like after then.
There really was there was a reconnection.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So after that, I had went and started visiting him during the summer. Okay. And I have 3 younger brothers. So I'm the oldest of, I have 4 brothers. I'm the oldest and the only girl. Okay. So
I'm curious, what was the reason that they put you up for adoption?
My mom kept me the whole time. So,
okay.
yeah. But when she married, he became my legal.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So your stepdad, when you mentioned it was like an adoption phase, but you were with your original mom
the whole time.
The whole time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I had thought that he was my biological dad.
Okay.
Up until, she kind of started to share some stuff, because he was the only one I knew.
Okay.
So, but he legally adopted me.
Okay.
When I was like 2 or something.
Younger years.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So you reconnected with your dad. Do you remember, like, was it an emotional thing for you, or was it just like, again, just you realizing like this makes so much sense now?
Yeah, I feel like I was kind of giddy.
Okay.
I was like, okay, this other experience I had wasn't so great.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like a redo.
Okay.
Like maybe this is gonna be like, maybe this will be great.
Okay.
Like I didn't have any like, I don't think I had really any just anger or anything. Like I was just like up for the adventure of like, I was flying on a plane for the very first time.
Okay.
I had to have a chaperone, designated from the airline or whatever to get me where I needed to go. So that was a little nerve wracking in the way of like, I'm about to be on an airplane, but also I'm about to be on an airplane, and then he, waiting for him, him waiting for me at the airport.
Yeah.
And it was just him who picked me up.
Okay.
So that was the first time we met.
Okay.
It was at the airport. And,
it was a giddy moment.
Yeah.
Like excited. Did you feel, I guess this is kind of like an odd question, but like when you met him, was there a part of you, again, you emphasize like noticing like quirks or the what the body looks like, and you're tilting the head and things like that. Was there a part of you that kind of felt more complete in a way? I don't know if complete's the right word, but like understood.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I definitely. I think that, even the way that I communicate, like we're both really fast talkers.
Okay.
And I didn't think too much of it, but then after meeting him, I was like, well, look at that, like,
Okay.
And so, I think it just, things made sense.
Yeah.
And I felt a sense of maybe relief.
Okay.
Maybe some hope, but I don't even know what that would have represented really, because we still lived in separate states. It's not like I was going to be seeing him or talking to him all the time. So, but I think it was just a opportunity for things in my life to make more sense.
Okay. I like that.
Yeah.
That's good. And so fast forward a couple years, you said that was around like the 7th grade era, that you found out you were adopted by your stepdad, met your biological dad, have a great relationship with that, see him about once a year. So what was like the next phase of your life after that? What did the next couple years look like?
Yeah. Continue to play sports, continue to do all the things I would normally be doing in high school. And then I ended up going to, I met the Lord, I became saved.
Okay.
So I became a Christian, and basically that turned my whole life upside down.
Okay.
Basically whatever direction I thought I was going to go was like,
okay.
New plan.
What was your direction, and then the complete opposite of that?
I wanted to, I completed cosmetology school. I was good at it. I was the top of my class.
Okay.
I enjoyed it. It was going to be my work through college job.
Okay.
I was like, instead of working at like McDonald's, I could work at like do hair, because everybody needs their hair done.
Yeah. Especially me.
Yeah. Obviously. And so I thought, that was kind of going to be, and then I was going to go to art college.
Okay.
And I wanted to go to SCAD, which is in Savannah, Georgia.
Okay.
For fashion design and photography.
Okay.
But some things had happened my senior year that kind of started to turn that ship a little bit. One, I became a Christian. Another would be that I had started to have more self-confidence. I started to see skills that I didn't know I realized I had. And that all kind of came out through my career center experience.
Okay.
And so I had a great teacher who just really called a lot of things out of me to like rise up and to come forward and take leadership responsibilities and roles. And so that led me to going to a summer leadership camp.
Okay.
So different things where I just kind of stepped into things I probably didn't even know existed, you know, let alone like were in me to come out. And so did that. And several years later, so I got involved in youth ministry.
Okay.
Not so much as a youth because I was graduating, but as a youth leader, and just was really a part of this community that really invested into young people. And so that really became a part of my, just a part of my DNA, really.
Okay.
To see young people and kind of exactly what my teacher had done.
Yeah.
Like call the gold out, call them up. And so I ended up going to a Bible school a few years later.
Okay.
And that's when, because I was good at cosmetology, I liked my job. I was involved in this youth group. It all felt right. I didn't have a desire to leave anymore.
Okay.
And go to do design or go to art school or do these other things. It was just like, do the next thing that's in front of me.
Okay.
And if the doors like when I look back now, I didn't have language then for it, but it would be like the doors opened and I walked through them.
Okay.
And so.
And that just created one opportunity after another.
Yeah.
And okay.
Yeah.
That's fun. How many years were you involved with youth?
As long as I can remember. There I was in for several years, and then I got married, moved to Columbus area, and have been here ever since.
Okay.
And so while being here, I was a youth pastor for a little while, then was doing hair still, started having kids, and then started volunteering, and then was a children's pastor for several years.
Okay.
So kind of different age groups, but still all the same, like next gen young people kind of. Yeah.
So what made you leave that scene of your life, and what did you pursue? Because you're not still involved with.
I still help with things, for sure, but I'm not doing it. It's more as a volunteer base now. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Rather than a job.
What made you leave that, and what did you go after? Like, what was the next phase?
Yeah. I stepped away from that to open up space for new things. Okay. So, I just had a premonition, if you will, an inkling that there is going to be things coming I needed to create space for. I didn't really know exactly what those were. And I love being involved in children's ministry. I love teaching and speaking and writing curriculum and all of this kind of stuff, and just really investing into other people. But I really felt like I needed to create space for something. Okay. And I wasn't 100% sure what it was. And every time I've kind of stepped away, the question has always been, what are you going to do? And I'm like, I don't know. Yeah. And so even when I had stopped homeschooling, people were like, so what are you going to do now? And I was like, I'm going to do nothing. Like, that was exhausting. Yeah. I'm going to rest for a minute and we'll figure
just take some me time,
Yes. Yes. And that's what I did. I had some new hobbies that I started paddle boarding. Oh, okay. Which I love doing. And so I did. I just kind of paused for a moment and I was like, well, you don't need to rush to the next, whatever the thing is. And I always kind of think of it as like, you get married and then people are like, when are you going to have kids? And you have kids, it's just like, can we just be for a moment in the space we're in? Yeah. And so I kind of had to shut down some of those voices. Okay. Because that's just what people do.
It can be overwhelming at times.
Yeah. And so I was like, I'm just going to create this space. And then I ended up, I thought it was going to be something else I'd put my attention to, but I ended up starting to write a book. Okay. So then spent the whole year kind of down that journey. Okay. And
let's talk about that journey.
That brings us to today.
Yeah, let's talk about that journey. So I know during our initial consult, we touched base a little bit about this. And it's, one of the main topics that we're going to dive into. Share your journey on what it was like to begin the process. Yeah. Like, when did you first know that you were going to write a book? Have you ever wanted to write a book? Did you ever think you could write a book? You know, all the things.
Yeah. When I look back, I'm kind of like, wait, was there a time or was it just like recent? Like, hey, I'll write a book. Because, I feel like so many times we have like these fleeting thoughts and we just dismiss them.
Yeah.
And I remember I was just talking to someone yesterday about, they were like, oh yeah, I wrote a book when I was in third grade. And I was like, I did too, actually.
Yeah.
I think it was third grade. And I thought it was the coolest thing.
Yeah.
But those memories kind of get lost along the way, But I remember thinking, like, the teachers had it, like, it got bound, and, like, I just was like, this is the coolest thing ever.
I remember writing a book, because our teacher got us, like, the white hardcover blank books.
Yeah.
So, like, we would color our, front picture, and then we would learn about how to, like, write the story, or what's our story about, and it was, like, 10 pages. Like, it wasn't anything extreme, but it was like, I wrote a book, So, yeah.
Yep. And so I feel like in somewhere deep down in me, there was that's been like just ruminating, but I was unaware of it.
Okay.
And so back when I was homeschooling my kids, I had a moment where I thought, am I going to write a book? And it was just this idea that I kind of say like, sometimes you get these downloads, you get this random idea that just pops in out of nowhere, and you're like, what was that? And the reason I say it's kind of like that is because I wasn't really thinking about it. I wasn't pursuing, like, dreaming about it or thinking about it. Like, I had plenty of other things to be thinking about, but I just had this idea one day, and I was like, me? What? Like, I have I can't spell very well. Oh, this, I that, blah, blah, blah. And I just remember so distinctly because I had this attitude, like, in my spirit. And I was like, you know what? I don't need to spell because there's spell check now.
Yeah, right.
I was like, whatever the things that were coming to me that were like, you're disqualified. You're not, like, what, you're not good enough. You're what about all these obstacles that could be? I, like, had a rebuttal for them. And I was like, okay. And that was back in, like, 2012.
Okay.
So
do you feel like in your response, be like, I feel like it's so easy for us to create an excuse when we're literally creating our own excuse to not do something or to go after something. Even it could be a fleeting thought, or I call them like shelved thoughts. Like, I'll have a thought, it's on the shelf. I won't think about it for 6 months, and then something will just click. I'm like, oh wait, I remember thinking about that. So in your self-talk, basically, in writing a book, what were a few defining moments that you were like, I am gonna do this? Where do I start?
Yeah.
Where do I begin to do this?
Yeah, I honestly, I kind of did exactly what you said. I kind of just put it over here on a shelf.
Okay.
Initially, I remember that night trying to go to bed, and I was like wide awake. I was like, what's it going to be about? Could it be about my life? Is it this? Like, I just had all these thoughts, and I just wrote down some things in a journal. That's why I know what year it was.
Okay.
And I didn't journal a lot, but I did at that moment. And so fast forward, almost 12 years. I guess if it was like 2019, I was just writing in a I think I was making my bed or something, which I didn't normally do, but for some reason I was making my bed that day. And I just had some thoughts going on, and I was like, I'm going to just write this down. And I was writing things down, and I was like, I think, is this going to be a book? And all of a sudden I remembered, but up until then it was just kind of this very back, like, back shelf kind of, like, I kind of forgot all about it. I was doing life, raising my kids, like, all this stuff.
Yeah.
And it really wasn't there,
Okay.
And when I wrote that stuff down, I was like, this is something. And it was after that it was coming to the forefront more.
Okay.
And then it ended up going up on a vision board.
Okay.
And we were having like a vision board event at our church, like those women when we were getting together. It was 2019, and I was like, what am I gonna put on this thing? Like, I want to go, but, like, I don't know.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm gonna put this on it. And so it's been on my wall since then.
Okay.
And then yeah, in 24, I went to that vision board and I was like, okay, what's coming off and what's going on? What am I supposed to focus on?
So now you were like fine tuning.
Yeah.
The topics.
I was more like, okay, I know the topic's going to be about hope.
Mm-hmm.
And that was based off of that, you know, random journal entry that one afternoon where I was like, I think maybe I am really writing a book.
Okay.
You know, but I thought it was going to be like, kind of like a maybe more like a devotional type of just small aid, if you will, for people.
Okay.
On how to connect with hope.
Mm-hmm.
And I had, I thought some profound things I wrote down. I was like, okay. And I just kind of put it aside again.
Yeah.
But it was more on my mind. But it was just, but not enough that I was giving any attention to it. You know, I was still doing all the things. Had a job and all these things. And so, so when I came back to that vision board after I had created space and stepped out of my position as a children's pastor, I was like, okay, is there some, like, what's here?
Mm-hmm.
You know, because some things had come off and some new things had gone on, but then there were things that had just kind of remained.
Okay.
And that just really lit up on the vision board. And I was like, okay, this is what we're going to do this year.
Okay.
And I don't know what it's going to look like yet.
Yeah.
But this is what I'm supposed to focus on. And so I knew a topic of hope. I didn't know where I was going with it exactly. I didn't know. I had a couple things to go off of. But really I just invited the Lord into that space.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, all right, what's it going to be about? Like, and I would drive. I voice memoed all the time, like nonstop.
Yeah.
I was like driving because I would get tons of ideas.
Yeah.
You know, in like times when I couldn't write anything down.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm like, okay, you know,
Yeah.
and then like circle back later, like, okay, what was that about?
Yeah.
You know, and so a lot of things kind of came out of a space like that initially, and then things would just kind of begin to build.
Okay. That's exciting. So 2012 was your like initial journey entry.
Yep.
2019, making your bed, it kind of like stirred up again.
Yeah.
2024, you went to a vision board gathering, if you will, and started laying out the pieces. And now like gears are turning, ideas are sparking. When did you like sit down and start typing?
Yeah.
Or writing or, you know?
I would say February of 24.
Okay.
I was like, all right, here we go. Let's do this.
Okay.
And I just started writing some things down. Some people had asked me, some friends, or I had asked a friend, like, typically I'll do like a fast in January.
Okay.
And just kind of set up my year.
Mm-hmm.
And I had asked a friend, like, hey, how did your fast go? And, you know, is the Lord saying anything to you? You know, where are you at?
Mm-hmm.
And she asked me kind of some, you know, similar questions. And I said, I'm going to write a book. And she was like, but what I found interesting when even when I was coming out of my mouth, I didn't say I am going to.
Mm-hmm.
It was I am.
Okay.
And there were times when as it was coming out, I almost wanted to say I'm going.
Mm-hmm. And
I was like, no, because we're doing this.
Yeah.
And I just think that's so important to get those things off the shelf.
Yeah. Did you, in response to the I am, it reminds me of like the I am statement. So like I've done courses in class where people like walk you through like the I am statement, and it really is a self-confidence booster, you know. But in your process of writing, did you have like mentors to kind of like not tell you what to write, but you trusted them enough to keep you motivated?
Yeah,
like
that friend actually had sent me something that she had recently come across by Havilah Huntington, who is an author and has different courses on helping people write their books and stuff like that. And she was like, hey, check this out. And this might be of interest to you. And I checked it out. And right away I was like, yep, okay.
Okay.
You know, so I got that course. Great investment. It really wasn't over the top or anything as far as cost is. But within the first probably 30 minutes of the first video, it was like there were several 20-minute videos.
Like an e-course?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And there were videos and there were like kind of like assignments for you to do,
Okay.
kind of thing. And so, I mean, within the first 30 minutes or 10 minutes, I was like, I was busy doing something. I had to sit down. I was like weeping. I was like, no, this is really what I'm supposed to do right now.
Okay.
Like everything made sense.
So now like the revelation is coming.
Yeah.
You're like, I know I am doing this,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because when I was telling my friend, it was like, I don't tend to say things I'm not going to do. I just won't say.
Yeah.
So I'm not like, and so when I was telling her I'm writing a book, I was like, you just told someone.
Mm-hmm.
That means you got to step up and do it.
Yeah.
You know, and because that's what it means for me. Otherwise, I just wouldn't have said it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was like that accountability almost.
Yeah.
Of sharing with her, even though she could have been like, okay, great.
Okay, cool.
you know, that's cool.
Okay.
And so once I entered into that course, it lined out like really things that help you keep on pace.
Mm-hmm.
You know, setting up environments, boundaries,
Mm-hmm.
which haven't always been a strong suit of mine.
Okay.
And so I had to set boundaries with my family. I run a investment business company with my husband, flipping houses and stuff.
Okay.
And so we have full access to each other all the time. Like we're always seeing each other. And I was like, okay, on this day from these hours, like I'm all like, you can't. So it was a whole work in progress for everybody.
Yeah.
To be like, oh no, mom's writing.
Yeah.
You know,
You don't bother mom when she's
I had
writing,
to like,
you know.
because we're so used to having access to everybody all the time.
Yeah.
And so that was a boundary I had to set.
Okay.
And that helped me to stay on task.
Okay.
And it was like one of the things that she really had talked about was outlining,
Mm-hmm.
which I knew from homeschooling my kids, but for some reason I just thought I was going to sit down and start writing.
Yeah.
Like that didn't even like, I didn't even think about that until
Yeah.
I took started the course, and I was like, oh yeah, that's exactly how you should do that.
Okay.
You know, that helped me like get thoughts organized.
Yeah.
And it helped me to like sit down and know exactly what I was there to do.
Okay.
I created spaces in my house. Like our house has a lot of open spaces. So there's no doors. There's not, the office doesn't have a place you can shut yourself off.
Okay.
And so there were times like I'd set up my computer at the dining room table and like put some music on and try to like zone, lock in. And then during summertime, I sat outside a lot.
Okay.
And played some music and just did what I did.
Okay. That's cool. I'm kind of stuck on like the whole tagline of like, I am going to do this. I feel like me just sitting here thinking about it just makes me think, okay, if I say I'm going to do something, it kind of puts a pause on the action of what initially I'm wanting to do, instead of saying, changing the language, just saying I am doing this, kind of like puts that first gear in to go, this is happening.
Right.
So yeah, that really stuck out to me. So in creating your outline and the book itself, go ahead. What's the title of it?
Yeah, it's called Connecting Beyond the Encounter.
Okay.
And Unlocking the Power of Hope in Your Life.
Okay, can I see it?
Yeah.
Connecting Beyond the Encounter. For those listening on Spotify, I'm skimming through the book right now. That's why there's a dead space in the audio. Okay, so in writing, in learning what you wanted your book to look like, did you go through a lot of rewrites as far as like what the chapters, like what are you going to call the title of your chapters, and is it more experience from like your own life? Is it more story based? Is there like a lot of emphasis on the topics? Like, talk to me about that.
So one of the things that she had us do in the course that I took was find out who your target audience is.
Okay.
Like, what is their life like? Ins and outs. Like, what has them up? What has them down? And so I started the journey thinking, okay, I want the book to be about hope. How can people access hope on a regular basis?
Okay.
And I wanted it to be for like 18 to 30, like people who are really trying to figure out, what am I doing?
Okay.
Not that I'm 42. I'm still trying to figure out what I'm doing, you know,
It's
but
a
like,
forever thing,
you know, but like that intense, like there's so many transitions in the space, you know, and I just thought, what's the opposite of hope? And we have despair, depression, anxiety. And I was like, actually, we have a whole generation bombarded by mental illness right now.
Yeah.
And and I just thought, okay. And so I did some research as well, like, and that kind of set me up into what my chapters would become.
Okay.
And how to access hope, how to remain in hope, what it's doing for us. I had a thought about, you know, we go to the grocery store and we encounter a cashier, but only few of us go beyond that encounter into connection. And I see that happening all of the time, with God, with Jesus, with hope. The Bible says that, you know, Jesus is the hope of glory. And I'm like, okay, I experience hope. I kind of had this revelation, if you will, where I was like observing everyone's life.
Yeah. You
know, I'm putting myself through these things as well, but I was observing people and I'm like, man, they just experienced hope. And when they did, this is what they spoke like this. And when they did, the atmosphere shifted.
Yeah.
And when it was a very distinct moment that I write about in the book with observing my husband one day. He was really just discontent and wanting to pursue something different that was fulfilling. Like, where is my purpose? What am I doing? You know, and he was good at his job, but he was always bored at it. And so he, you know, wanted a new job. And he's looking and looking, but nothing was like really what he wanted. And so, you know, his emotions were up and down about it, like they are when you're looking for a job. You're like, okay, this might be it. No, that's not it. Maybe, you know, you're just all over the place.
Yeah.
And he got a phone call one day and like he was so hopeful. Like his whole body demeanor changed, his tone of his voice, everything.
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa, he just experienced hope. And when he did, he actually spoke different. And when he did, he released things out of his mouth differently.
Yeah.
That project life into your atmosphere.
Okay.
And I was just like, whoa, like that was haphazardly. He didn't even realize it was happening.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm observing it being like, what if people could tap into that on a regular basis? What if they recognized when they encounter hope and then they participated with it on purpose?
Yeah.
Not haphazardly. And it just kind of feels so often like it just comes and goes.
Yeah.
I'm hopeful and then I'm not.
Yeah.
Here, gone. You know, it's just so quickly
up and down.
Yeah.
And yeah.
And seems like it's so fleeting.
Okay.
And so it just took me on this journey of like diving really into that.
Okay.
Over from 2019 to 24.
Yeah.
You know, like those 5 years of just observing, living life. And so the book has a lot of, it does have like testimonies of my life where I also then begin to recognize when I encountered hope.
Okay.
And so then what did I do after that?
Okay.
And so I begin to recognize that when we encounter hope, it's presented more like an opportunity. What are you going to do with it?
Okay.
And for so many of us, we just move on.
Yeah. Did you have to kind of train yourself to know like when you're experiencing hope, or like did you have to like work on yourself to like remember, like okay, let's process this now? And what was that like? Did you make notes or voice memos when certain things would happen? Yeah.
So I kind of have this I think it's 4 or 5 steps in the book that kind of take you through. This is where it all started. It was, remember, I thought I was going to be this little devotional to kind of journal situation.
Yeah.
that turned into a whole book.
Yeah.
So that ends up in the book, but it's first learning to recognize hope in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And so you got to kind of change your lens.
Yeah.
And it's not actually always easy. Just, especially if you're not inclined to look like, for it. And if things seems to steal your hope and your joy often, and so I kind of I write about some different ways to help you recognize it first.
Okay.
And because it's the awareness is key.
Yeah.
And so the more I become aware, the more opportunities I have to engage.
Yeah.
And so thinking about, I kind of think of it as hope can start like a lot of things. I reference hope being a person, place, and a thing, a man named Jesus, an atmosphere, and a force.
Okay.
And so I think about, you have people who walk in the room and they're so hopeful.
Yeah.
It shifts the whole atmosphere.
Yeah.
Right. And it's contagious. And there's times when hope can be so powerful that it literally acts as a force to push darkness out.
Yeah.
And to lift people up when they were like at their weakest, and so I dive a lot into what that looks like in everyday moments.
Okay.
And taking kind of the myth out of like, you got to have these high, big moments of, and like, that's it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's everyday moments.
Yeah.
And it was a journey for me to start seeing regularly and being like, I'm gardening and I'm like, oh, every time I water these flowers, I'm actually engaging with hope because I hope that this water is going to nourish them.
Yeah.
And I was like, wait, what? Hope isn't just me feeling happy about getting my way?
Yeah.
Because that's all I thought of it before.
Okay.
Like it was wishful thinking.
Wishful thinking. That's an interesting thought to think about because I feel like sometimes when we hear people talking about hope or we can instantly make it a selfish thing. Like, oh, I need hope in this, I need hope in that. But really it's not only how it impacts us, but how we engage to make that moment impactful and just a new way of thinking, like watering the flowers. Like, oh, I hope this water is going to nourish these flowers to help them grow. It's giving. It's not so always about receiving hope, but it's about giving hope as well.
Yeah.
So that's my 2 cents on it. Like that's super rewarding. When you're breaking down like the process of hope, just to say the process of hope.
Yeah.
How much information or how much did you have to research and then more like your life experience? So like is it 50% experience, 50% just research, or what's that?
I would say, I don't know if I could have a percentage, but I would say there's lots of life in there. There's lots of illustrations because I think in pictures. Maybe that I work with children a lot, but like, it's one of the ways that I'm able to create and break through barriers where people are like, I'm just not getting that.
Okay.
And it's like, I think of the universal language is pictures.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what language I speak. We all understand picture.
Yeah. And there's a quote in here. I saw it, but it says, my imagination allows me to see things that I otherwise might ignore. So speaking of pictures, like the imagination process, when you were pursuing and writing this book, because like, as you mentioned, you thought about it was just going to be like a simple daily devotion, and then it turned into a full book. Like, so in your process, like in your imagination, what did it look like for you to experience new outlets of hope? If that makes sense.
Yeah. I think of anything I learn, I want to share with people. And if the thing that I learned impacted my life, and propelled me forward,
Mm-hmm.
then others have to know about it.
Yeah.
Now, they might not receive it.
Yeah.
Right? I can be like, tell my kids like, oh, this is awesome. You should. And they're going to be like, nah,
Yeah.
I'm good.
Yeah.
And people do that, but I don't know how to keep it to myself.
Okay.
And so it was more of as I learn, I'm taking note, mental note, physical note. I'm saying, oh, well, that makes sense. Oh, now I understand why that Bible verse, oh, I see it different now.
Mm-hmm.
And this all kind of started out of Jeremiah 29:11 that says, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you, to give you hope,
Mm-hmm.
not to harm you, to give you plans for future. And I kind of botched it a little there, but what I had always read that as, and it was a plaque on my wall in my house, was to protect me,
Okay.
to guide me, and and like having a future plan.
Okay.
For some reason, hope never stood out to me until that day in my bedroom.
Okay.
I'm like, how did I miss that? And so I think of that as why was those other things standing out to me more? Probably some trauma.
Mm-hmm.
I was inclined to feel needing protection,
Yeah.
needing guidance, needing whatever these different things were. And so, for the first time I kind of broke down, well, what does that hope look like?
Okay.
And it was more than wishful thinking.
Okay.
It was more than, if I just pray hard enough, if I just wish harder, if I just try harder.
Yeah.
And so when I begin to recognize, like, wait, hope is a lot more than just what I've been inclined to think or taught to think as a child. Like, and I don't even know that as anyone teaches you, it kind of becomes like a part of language.
Yeah.
If I wish, I wish, I get this for Christmas. I wish I, those girls would like me over there. I wish this would be better over here.
Yeah.
Or whatever it might be, it's different for everybody.
Right.
But once I kind of almost crossed over it and said, okay, if hope is more, then what's that mean? And what's it look like? And, if hope is Jesus Christ, the hope of glory, as the Bible says, and the Bible says he will never leave me, then where is he?
Mm-hmm.
And why do I feel alone at times? And why do I feel like I need uplifted, like in the traditional way of thinking about hope? Or, and so I begin to kind of scan what I refer to in the book as like, we have an internal antenna, and that antenna is inclined to hear the Father's voice. We may not recognize it all the time, but it doesn't mean he's not speaking, and I kind of think about my kids, like, recess, like, or if a teacher yells out your name, you're inclined to hear that voice amongst all the chaos because you've been trained to hear it. You know what the body language means, like, when your mom gives you that look, you're like, oh no.
Yeah.
You know exactly what that means because the relationship there translates information.
Yeah.
And so the more that I could become aware, the more I would begin to recognize these subtleties. People will say things like like you're conscious, right? Some people will reference your conscious as maybe being the Lord speaking, or your conscious is this or conscious is that. I'm like, but if you recognize the conscious as a voice that does have power to speak in your life, it is going to direct you.
Yeah.
And, and I think about the times that I ignored that voice or I did listen to it, and like, where did it get me? And that's all kind of like part of the journey of recognizing hope in your life.
So hope is more than just a word. It's a feeling. It could be body language. It could be thoughts. It could be actions. In your book, I'm sure you emphasize that a lot.
Yeah.
That it's more than just a 4-letter word.
Yeah. I emphasize it being Jesus Christ and how he shows up and where he's at, what it looks like, how can you recognize it? How can you connect with him? Well, while I was reading the book, an interesting thing happened. I got pulled over.
Okay.
And I was like, immediately, I was like, are you kidding me right now? And, I got in this like, please not me, you know?
Yeah. When you see the cop pulling up behind
I was like, where did he
10 and 2, 10 and 2.
I was like, where did he come from? And it was like an area in town where the speed had changed, but honestly, I was not even paying attention.
Yeah.
Like, and so I pull over, and I have all of these familiar responses that I want to go to, which is like panic, regret,
how much is this
disappointment,
ticket gonna cost me?
Yes, like, oh my gosh, I could have avoided. Like, it's hard for me for things that I could have avoided.
Yeah.
So then I get into probably some regret. Then I'm angry.
Yeah.
These different emotions come up, which then dictate my behavior. And I probably in the past would have panicked in some way, like, how am I going to pay for this? And it could have been avoided, and this is so stupid.
Yeah.
And, and I'm sitting there, and, he comes up. I'm having all of these thoughts right away.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there, and I'm like, just give me a warning, you know? And he comes up, and he's like, do you know why I pulled you over today? And I was like, no. He's like, well, I got you at blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I was thinking, oh, man. And he goes, is there a reason for your speeding today? And I was like, no. And later, I was like, man, I wish I would have been like more witty. I would have,
right?
I like had nothing. I was just like, no, make it go away. Make it all go away, But I realized that make it all go away is the panic. And
Okay.
I didn't have anything to say.
Yeah.
I have friends who are quick on that. They'd be crying right away, trying to get out of something, make up some story.
Yeah.
And probably in the past, I would have tried to make up some, I don't know if I would have made up story. I honestly don't know. I like to think that I was like quick enough to do that, but I don't know that I am.
Yeah.
And I was just like, no. Okay, I'll be back. And I was like, huh. I'm sitting there, and I'm like, you have an opportunity right now to engage with the hope that is Jesus, who is with you every day, and dictate and help you with your emotions, help you not feel like you are a victim. It was your fault, honestly. Like, Tania, this is your fault.
Yeah.
You were speeding.
Yeah.
It's not his fault.
Yeah.
So we want to blame, we want to get it, just push it all away.
Yeah.
And I was just like, it's not his fault, and I could have blamed it on like a speed trap or, not that wasn't like probably real, but the reality was I sat there and I was like, you have an opportunity to engage differently. And I imagined, kind of going back to the quote you said, Jesus sitting next to me in my passenger seat.
Okay.
Like my best friend. And he had some things to say. And part of the activations in the book is each chapter has like an engagement part in the back of each chapter to how to like implement whatever's been being talked about.
Okay.
So that's to help people engage, to experience breakthrough in their life, different things. And so one of those things is asking, like imagining Jesus with you and asking him questions and then waiting for an answer, just like I'm talking to you.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay, so what do you want to do here? And he's like, well, I think you got off pretty good. It's like, I think of like the little attitudes I have is how he talks to me. Is that how he talks? I don't know, but that's how I hear it.
Right.
And he's like, you haven't gotten a speeding ticket in forever, like, however many years, and you speed all the time. And I'm like, dang, that's true. Yeah. Actually, that's actually really true. So yeah, actually, I don't feel too bad right now about that. Yeah. And it's like, and it was like a wake up call to pay attention when I'm driving, which I'm trying to teach my teenagers to do.
Yeah.
And, but it was also a moment for me to be like, I can engage in this situation doesn't have to look like it always was. Like always has.
Yep.
I don't have to come away frustrated. I don't have to come away depressed. I don't have to come away feeling like I'm a victim to someone else. I don't have to come away feeling like, scared of like, how am I going to pay for this? Or what's, how is it this unexpected thing?
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what? it's going to be fine. Because not only is Jesus my friend and sits beside me and talks to me and encourages me, he also helps to provide.
Yeah.
And that means he saw this coming, and it actually could have been way worse.
Yeah.
And that's what I took away was this actually could have been way worse.
I feel like we can always escalate situations that cause fear or panic or what am I going to do now? So what you're saying is instead of being accustomed to past experiences, it's being aware to create new experiences that don't always have to look the same from what we're used to.
Yeah.
Right?
You know, basically taking the like, I'm a victim to everything around me out of the picture.
Yeah.
You know, and sometimes, I mean, I experienced a lot of abuse as a child. I was a victim.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not that people aren't, but having the mindset of victim is very different than being the victim.
Yeah.
And so many times I could see where I acted as a victim.
Okay.
But was I really?
Okay.
Was I really a victim of the cop? I mean, not really.
Right.
And was I technically breaking the law? Yes.
Just a little bit.
Do I think that law is stupid right there? Yes. But like it is there, you know, and so instead of being accustomed to where I would go emotionally and then dictate having a bad day the rest of the day.
Right.
You know, and then I started to declare, as I mentioned before, like when I experienced hope, like the thing was, is I had to invite hope into the situation because it didn't feel hopeful.
Yeah.
It felt scary, annoyed. I was ticked off, like all the things.
Yeah.
You know, I was getting ready to leave for vacation the very next day.
Oh, okay.
And I was like, are you kidding me right now?
Which could add stress.
Yeah.
You know?
So it immediately felt my response was stress and a list of emotions that were going to try to steal the joy of the day. And I just remember walking away and being like, you don't have like, and I think of like, you know, we have this, it would seem as though there's something out to get us often, you know, to steal our joy, to bring interruptions into things. And, you know, being a Christian, I do believe that like there is an enemy of our soul, and that being Satan. And so there would be times where I talk to Jesus sitting in my passenger seat and I'd be like, okay, instead of going the path I'm used to going in my emotions, hope, I'm going to ask you. And so instead of saying Jesus, I said hope. And I said, hope, what do you want to tell me right now? And what do you want to show me? And it was a totally different perspective than the one I had. Yeah. Which then didn't steal my joy for the rest of the day.
I gotcha.
But it would have. And so I've had several encounters like that, you know.
And again, it's to a point where like you have to train yourself to develop that first thought of like, okay, I'm going to look at this differently. I'm going to choose to experience this in a different way. And I feel like that kind of just like speaks like emotional maturity. Instead of reacting out of every action, if we disagree with it, we can now focus on the better side of things, right? And there's an insert from your book that says, there's nowhere hope isn't willing to go to propel you forward.
Yeah.
So I think there's also a readiness that we have to be ready for, to go, okay, I can either take this situation like being pulled over by a cop, or and I can either take this situation, I'm used to this emotion, this familiarity of fear or panic, or you can choose to partner with hope and move forward from that experience. Is that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I did want to touch base because you said at the end of every chapter, there's like activations, right? Which I think is really cool, because I feel like sometimes people don't know where to begin. Yeah. They don't know how to even open the door for themselves to engage in something like hope. So one of they're just simple things like, I like the title. It says, make a mess, trick your brain, live in wonder. Yeah. And I love that. I had a guest on, kind of like side trail. Actually, I talked with Kelly Norris, who was on the show a few episodes ago. Yeah. We talked about wonder, the creativity of wonder. But then I also had another friend, Shannon, who's, I want to make sure I get this right, LCPS, clinical counselor supervisor. So she's done schooling and been to college, and she deals with a lot of teens. Like that's her passion and heart. But she talks about kind of like how once we do things so many times, our brain will form grooves. Yeah. And, and that's kind of like how we just begin to develop and who we think we are. So in regards to saying all that, like the activation piece, like the engaging, and you just have simple things like try a new food, speak kindness when you would instead have screamed in anger, engage with your children instead of vegging in front of a movie, laugh and laugh some more. And then scrolling down, it's like, play in the rain. Yeah. Like, I love that. So in those experiences, experiencing or receiving hope, I feel like if you just simply do little things like that, your receiving becomes giving, because you shift your thoughts, you change like what you're feeling in that moment to give a place of freedom, to give a place of hope for other people. So in what's an experience that like you've done besides like, the cop situation, like momhood, like what's like, what are some experiences that you've kind of, because I'm sure it changes the language with your kids. I'm sure it changes the language with your husband. Yeah. And so I'm curious to know, because my sister has 4 boys, and I think she's coming on this Friday to do a session, but she has 4 boys, and she's such a huge encourager. But like, what are some of your experiences with your boys? Yeah.
I think about, and I wrote about some of them in my book because of the different jobs I've had. Mm-hmm. I've been really privileged to be around for my kids. Okay. I mean, being around doesn't always mean you're present, right? But it created space for me to be present. Okay. And, and I had a single mom most of my life. And so she wasn't around. And so I have really tried to do basically everything that, whatever tools I wasn't given. Yeah. I read lots of books. There's certain books. I have a list in the back of my book of references that just have changed my life. Okay. And some of them are parenting, some of them, are other things. But the thing that with when I take myself through the process of engaging with hope, connecting on a regular basis, as I write in the book, it causes me to slow down a little bit. Mm. It causes me to be more patient, and we're always so busy and we're always so rushed all the time that we don't make space, unfortunately. And there's several times with, I don't know how this is with your sister and her boys, but my experience with boys is they're not forthcoming with thoughts. They usually don't know what they're thinking, and they take a little longer to get there. Yeah. I don't think that's to all of them, but a lot. Yeah. Girls are like, blah, 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 and this is what I think about this. And like, some of it's true, some of it's not true, but they got a lot of words and a lot of thoughts. Yeah. And the boys are like, I don't know, they're jerks. Why are they jerks? Well, because they just are. It's like, and so trying to get them to understand why they're thinking what they're thinking, or tap into their emotions. Mm-hmm. I am a huge advocate for men tapping into their emotions and showing that they are both emotional and strong. Yeah. At the same time. Yeah. And that wasn't something that past generations did, mm-hmm. And so trying to, with my aim to be, let's raise a different kind of man. Mm-hmm. And I have the opportunity with two, yeah, that I can encourage to be vulnerable. Mm-hmm. That shows strength, not weakness. Yeah. That shows honor and respect for yourself. Yeah. Generations ago, it was, respect women, but men rarely respected themselves. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, that's just not okay. Yeah. And so trying to slow down a bit and say, okay, I'm going to sit here with you in this. And there's a moment I write about in the book where one of my sons, he was going through some teenage heartbreak and was devastated and was just trying to process, you know, it's like new to him, doesn't know what, you know, what is this? Like, how am I feeling? And I just know I'm hurting. And I'm like, what's going on? And he's not wanting to share anything, but I think he just didn't also know how to verbalize what he was experiencing either.
Yeah.
You know, that's real.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And so I remember sitting there and I am so frustrated because like time is ticking and I'm just like, say anything, please.
Yeah.
Like, and I have this moment where I'm like, okay, if I believe the hope is with me everywhere I go and hope's here and hope's in this room, it doesn't feel hopeful right now. It feels miserable and it feels taxing and I want to go do something else.
Yeah.
But I believe that hope is in the room and I believe that I can tune my internal antenna to hear hope's voice, and hope always has something to say. And Jesus is always there to encourage and help us get through and to propel us forward. So if that's what I believe, which I do, then I got to lean into that. And that caused me to sit there for probably an hour with someone who seemed like he didn't want to talk to me. Where some parents would be like, well, they don't want to talk about it. All right, bye.
Yeah.
You know, and I was just like, nope. Because my mission was to raise men.
Okay.
Who were confident and bold and could use their voice and be, you know, just all these things. And I was like, if I walk away, I'm missing the opportunity.
Yeah.
To invest.
And you're showing him something too. I feel like if you were to walk away, he could have internally thought, well, it doesn't matter what I think or feel. Right. You know? Yeah. So that's really encouraging, because it makes me think, like, even it's a choice, right, to partner with hope. It's a choice to look through a different lens of hope. But I like when you said it I feel like there's no time evaluation. Like there's no cutoff point of hope. So being in that awareness to go, I'm here. Yeah. I'll sit here as long as you need me to sit here. And I feel like that really, I want to say, like, manages our time, but it also makes me think, like, the irrelevance of time. If you get into that place, of that mindset of, like, time doesn't mean anything.
Like, what really matters.
Right. Yeah. So that's super cool. So in that moment, eventually, I'm sure he was able to, like, kind of process just a little bit. And
here's where hope came into the picture. I was like, okay, I have thoughts. Like, I can make this into some teaching moment, like, which I would more be inclined to do. And be like, let's suck it up. Let's move on. Oh, actually, this is okay and good, because, like, we didn't really like that. I wasn't really about her anyways. You know, I could have said all kinds of things. Yeah. And I had thoughts coming and I was like, none of it seems right. And I was like, okay, like, hope, give me your perspective. Yeah. And I had this thought, and it was, if you can't speak it, can you write it? Okay. And I got him some paper and pencil, and I said, can you just write it down? And he started to be able to write and communicate. Okay. Like, the verbal communication was too much to bear. It was like, it was that's another level of vulnerability. Yeah. And so he started to write some thoughts down. And so then I could respond to those thoughts, and then he could write some more down. Okay. And
that's a very smart thing to do for a mom. That's a smart thing. It's creating another avenue. Yeah.
But that wasn't my thought. Like, that is not where my space was. Okay. My head was not there. That's where I say, like, hope came in and gave me an idea that wasn't mine. Okay. Because I had other thoughts. Yeah. You know, and mine were, like, rushing. Yeah. And, like, let's get through this and get over it. And, like, you know, and can you just tell me something? And I just wanted him to verbally tell me, speak to me. And he just was silent, and he couldn't. And it was nauseating, you know? But so that's where I say, like, when I invited hope into the conversation, into the moment with my son, hope gave me ideas that weren't mine. I got you. That helped break through, and then ultimately get him through a space where he could let go of it, heal, and like go on to his next adventure,
Yeah.
whatever that was going to be, but he could finally move on and not feel paralyzed by pain.
Yeah.
And so, I've kind of taken that experience with him. We've into, a lot of interactions where it's like, sometimes I know what to do. And sometimes I'm like, I don't know what to do here.
Yeah.
And like, or what I think is I'm going to do isn't working. So I'm like, okay, like, Jesus, hope, what's your idea?
Yeah.
Because mine's not working.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think like those moments have helped to create space for my kids to just develop more organically. And my hope is that it creates a confidence in them to not have to shy away from the hard things.
Yeah.
But instead, now this is my oldest son. He hasn't read the book yet. Okay. So
he's unaware.
He's unaware. He knows he's in it multiple times.
Okay.
He was like, I'm the main character, aren't I? And I was like, no, but you're in it a lot, and that's because you're my first. And well, I've learned a lot through you.
Oh, I'm sure.
You know? And so, but it has created a space for me to say, I don't know what to do here, but I know someone who does, and that's Jesus.
Yeah.
And I can connect to him, and I don't always get it right, but the more I try, the more in tune I become.
Okay. That makes sense. Reading again, another insert, it says, where there is hope, disappointment lingers around the corner, waiting to pounce and creep in through any open door. I'm curious to know what that looks like.
Yeah.
Because obviously there's, just for preference or reference, I don't know which word it is, but just to give an example, like there's good, there's bad, there's heaven, there's hell, there's Satan, there's Jesus. So where hope is, disappointment is lingering around. So in people, let's say there's someone who struggles up here, can express through here, but they struggle up here. How would they begin to develop to stay more focused on the opportunity of hope instead of staying in disappointment?
Yeah, I think if you could start to recognize where you're disappointed, like maybe you can't see hope yet, and all you see is disappointment. Disappointment can be the trigger for you to say, wait, if I'm disappointed, like, where's hope? Hope's got to be somewhere nearby. And because sometimes you don't have eyes to see it. Sometimes you're overwhelmed. Sometimes your mind and heart don't connect. And so, I feel one way, but I'm thinking another way. Yeah. And I'm distraught. I think it's going to be okay, but I don't feel like it's going to work out. Yeah. And I feel like sometimes you have to work with what you have. And if what you have is you can recognize disappointment, then it's the first step for you to say hope is somewhere nearby. Yeah. And for me, I recognized I didn't only till a few years ago, honestly, how much disappointment I experienced in a day. Okay. And little things, dumb things, like thought I was going to get to work on time and I didn't because of whatever. And now I'm disappointed. It could be little things or it could be big things. Yeah. Like I had an expectation, I read a book called Emotionally Healthy Spirituality. And in that book, he talks about how every disappointment is linked to an expectation.
Say that again.
Every disappointment is linked to an expectation. Okay. And so he talks about examining your expectations. Where are they coming from? Are they realistic? These different things. And as I did that, the power that disappointment had in my life started to dissipate. Okay. Because I realized either my expectations weren't agreed upon, be it with another person. Yeah. I have an expectation of, my husband to do the dishes, but I never told him. Yeah. Well, that doesn't set anybody up for success, not me or him. But then I can have an attitude because he didn't do it. Which, that kind of stuff happens all the time. Right. They're what's the word I was thinking? unagreed upon expectations.
Yeah.
And so we have that. We have expectations of ourselves, you know, and I can have a lot of high expectations of myself, and then, you know, try to take on too much in a day, or that's how that would be the past self.
Yeah.
I've grown since. I'm working on that still, you know.
Well, I mean, I love that, you know, I think it's really important that, because I mean, I think for me, I've experienced that before too, where I have those unexpected expectations of hope, but then when I had to learn, like, Sam, if you want those things to happen, you have to communicate them. Like, and I feel like so many people aren't even aware of the disappointment they could be walking in every day that affects their language. It affects their posture, their countenance. Yeah. You know, and to become aware, to become more efficient, if you will, in discovering what hope looks like, I feel like it's such a crucial thing. You know, I love that you touch base on that, because I think it's really important that, and I'm speaking to myself too, I ain't preaching to nobody, but it's one of those things where it's like, okay, what can I ask myself in areas where I feel like is a disappointment because I didn't voice the expectations that I had. Right. And really, I think that can create a partnership with people, a deeper root of connection and vulnerability to go, hey, just letting you know, I'm actually like disappointed in this, but it's not your fault. Right. It's actually my fault. Right. Like, I didn't voice it to you, you know? So did you have to,
and even in that's liberating to the other person, because now they're like, wait, do I do that too?
Right.
Like the snowball effect of realizing when we're participating in something just kind of habitually, not even realizing it, but it's like once that light bulb goes off, you're like, oh, wait a minute. And then you start to see it everywhere.
Right. And the thing, I feel like you don't, at least my initial thought is, I wouldn't feel, if I was on the receiving end of somebody telling me that, I wouldn't feel shameful or embarrassed, because it's unknown information that I didn't know about. And if the other person is becoming aware of it, it not only benefits them, but it benefits me, and it benefits the connection overall.
And that's clarity.
Yeah.
And clarity brings better connection.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what they're called, inserts, right? Is that what you call that? An insert? Okay. Yeah. Just want to make sure I'm saying that properly.
You can call them inserts, or sometimes I call them like pull out quotes, because I'll like pull something out is to emphasize it, you know?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Either way.
Another insert is when I'm alert and available in the here and now, I can engage with the hope of today, which gives me momentum for tomorrow. It's really important that we don't get lost in like the days ahead. So in your experience, or even your journey in writing this book, were there moments where like you had to stop yourself from thinking 5 days ahead and just be in the moment now?
Yeah, I think that in order for me to get where I got in each chapter, I had to go into it, if that makes sense. Like, I couldn't think about the next chapter. Mm-hmm. I had to say, and because I used a lot of my personal story and testimonies of how I walked through, you know, junk in my life, and how when I engaged, this is what happened. Or even like, you know, there's a portion in the book when I talk about like, do you have to be a Christian to experience hope? Okay. And the answer is no.
Right.
Like, I experienced hope. I couldn't call it Jesus. I didn't have a awareness that the source of hope could have been Jesus. I just experienced something. It was fleeting and it was gone, and there was no opportunity to really engage because it wasn't much of anything to me. Right. It was just another area of disappointment. Yeah. I hoped that this would turn out different, but when it didn't, I was disappointed.
Right.
And when I hoped again, I got my hopes up. I wished for something different. Yeah. And when that didn't happen, I was disappointed again. Yeah. And so, you know, I wrote the book to help people get beyond that cycle that I also was experiencing, because at some point you have an opportunity, you have the power to make the changes. Right. And, you know, where there were times I didn't feel like I had the power to do anything about it. It was just like, you're just in the autopilot program, you know, I'm just like, well, this is just what I do, and this is how I respond, and this is just it.
Well, it makes me think Do you think sometimes people feel like they don't have a right to experience hope because it could be trauma or past experiences?
Yeah.
So even in that, it could be phase one, like, no, I do have a right to access this. I do have the power and authority to experience this on a different opportunity or different,
Yeah.
revelation, if you will,
Right.
So, okay.
Yeah. Because I think about, there's times that when I'm present right now and I'm not producing, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not trying to be something, to think about something later and how it's going to benefit me. If I'm just like present right here with you now, like this moment has seeds of hope, has seeds of purpose in it that I can't produce on my own.
Mm-hmm.
But if all I'm doing is thinking about how I can perform and how I can show up in a type of way, like, you lose that authenticity and you lose the connection, in the moment, in the present. And that is something that current culture struggles with, is being present in the moment with distractions and social media and just all the chaos, all the noise. There's all this noise, and it's like, it's not easy to quiet down. It's not easy to slow down at times. And, I kind of think of myself as a bridge generation. Mm-hmm. I am technically a millennial.
Yeah.
But, so I remember what it was like to be one way, to live a type of way. And I'm hearing all the technology, you know? So I think of like, I told my husband, I was like, we're the bridge generation. There might be others, but like, we're definitely part of it, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I know what it was like to have the phone cord straight all the way across the room, and we had
dial-up
internet, and my brother had a pager, there's these things that I can look and celebrate the quiet and calmness of those days and say, how can we help the future generation to be able to experience some of those moments, even amongst what their culture is now, what our culture is now. And it takes extra effort,
It does.
and it's hard. And I'm not trying to pretend it's not. And it takes self-awareness. It takes self-control. You got to set yourself up for success.
Yeah.
And it's not easy, but it's not impossible either, and, I was at some graduation parties yesterday, and the thing that I was telling these girls, I said, while you guys you might feel like things are escalated to a different degree. They're like, this stuff doesn't happen in these other schools, and kids aren't like this. And I was like, actually they are.
Yeah.
And 20 years ago, I was experiencing the same thing an hour and a half away. And they're like, what? And I'm like, yeah. Now, it might be escalated in your generation with your devices and these and that. But I was like, but the beautiful thing is you have more access for help than any generation before you. And that means you have access to be empowered, and you don't have to be a victim anymore, and you can experience hope like you never have, because you have resources that the previous generations didn't have. So while it might feel heavy and weighty and like impossible at times, it's actually more possible now than it ever has been.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. Common doesn't make it heaven.
Yeah.
That's an interesting one. I feel like a lot of people would agree to disagree, or agree or just completely disagree with that.
Yeah.
But I think that it's a simple statement. It makes me think, again, like, we're using the word experiences a lot in this session, which is fine. But it makes me think, again, of like experiences. They may be common, but it might not be heaven.
Yeah.
So in I'm trying to look at this from like 30,000 feet, looking down. In common things, what are activations to do to kind of like get out of that common, whatever we're used to experience the other side of heaven, basically? Like, what are...
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I know I'm trying to articulate my question here, but it's not articulating.
Yeah. Well, I kind of think of like that quote kind of coming from this stance that I have of like, just because it's normal doesn't mean it's okay.
Yes.
And just because everyone's doing it doesn't mean it's acceptable.
Yeah.
And so it's like, call that my pushback, if you will, to cultural acceptances,
agendas, even.
And each generation had different ones.
Yeah.
So it's the topic might be different, but it's always been in existence.
Yeah.
And so, I kind of think of a couple things is, I feel like one of the things would be to recognize when you're believing a lie. So one of the chapters, the activation in the back, is how to recognize lies in your life, and how to distinguish truth from lies. And we define kind of like what is truth, where is truth coming from, and that being what would the truth of heaven have to say about it.
Yeah.
And I think of like a lie would be, I just can't do it. I'm not good enough. It's common. People feel that way. They think that I'm not good enough.
I'm not qualified.
Yeah. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's true. And it doesn't mean you don't have what it takes.
Right.
It means you might have to take a few steps forward to activate the muscles and the giftings inside of you to pull it forward.
Yeah.
And so, but we often make these statements, and we live in these spaces that reiterate a lie that keeps us restricted instead of propelling forward.
Yeah.
And then we call, then we either accept it as it is, as a, well, I'm just never gonna, whatever that might be.
Yeah.
Instead of saying, well, in order to do that, here's some steps I can take. And I think that's why community is really important, and friends are important. Who you surround yourself is important.
Yeah.
Because, I can think of friends I had that if I would have had the confidence to verbalize those kinds of things when I was a teenager, 100% of the friends I had would not have been able to, like, they would have just been like,
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, they were not the friend group that like would have helped push me like forward into greatness.
Yeah. Well, there's I don't know, it was probably some billionaire or somebody was talking. They were like, show me who your friends are now, and I'll show you your future in 5 years.
Right.
Like, or I'll tell you what your future is going to be in 5 years. And to me, I grew up in the church, so like I've kind of always had that development of like, okay, who am I choosing to surround myself with? Who do I look up to? Who do I go to for information or to teach me something? Because there's a partnership in that person that I would go to be like, I want to be like you when I grow up, or I want to, have the capacity that you have when I grow up, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so when reading that, like the phrase of like, just because it's common doesn't mean it's heaven, I feel like that's like one of the biggest arguments in today's society right now, because someone can believe they know that 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 they're right.
Right.
And when you partner with the truth of the kingdom or truth of the heaven, you almost have to be open to receive what that truth might actually be. And you could be wrong.
Yeah. And there's times I've been wrong. Like there have been times where I was like, absolutely, and like 2 years later, I'm like, well, actually.
Oh, yeah.
And I used to feel judgment towards that, like even towards other people, like if they change their mind. And actually, I remember one time, because I used to do Kelly's hair.
Okay.
And so I remember having this conversation, and I don't know if it was her or me, but I just remember distinctly being like, we're allowed to change our mind. But there was something in us that both was like, well, if I said it, then I have to stick to that, even if there's new revelation, even if I've grown to a new understanding.
Yeah.
It's like there's something in, I'm going to say maybe it's, it could be pride, it could be whatever, like I can't be wrong, so I'm going to stick to it, even though I don't even believe that anymore.
Yeah.
And so, and you have it on either side, right? Like,
oh yeah,
I believe something, no, I don't believe it. I believed it. And, you have it all over across the board. And I think, that's kind of where the grace and love for humanity comes in. Like, if we could just all accept that, like, we're all getting it wrong in some way, somewhere.
Right.
And we all need each other.
Right.
And, it's like, sometimes when I, have been so concrete on something, unfortunately I pushed people away. And, but then other times it broke ground for people who needed that.
Yeah.
And so I feel like we can't be too hard on ourselves, and ultimately at the end of the day, only God truly knows, the whole picture.
Yeah.
And he reveals little bits to us. And, I may not always agree with everything the Bible has to say.
Yeah.
But it is what it is, and sometimes I think you have to wrestle that out on your own. And I don't think it's my right to judge you on your revelation, but I can share the revelation I have and you can ruminate over it.
Yeah. Yeah. I just had a great question and then it just left. I hate when that happens. In regards or in like partnership to this specific topic, I know I'm not very good at it, but I always try to at least be aware to the idea that I could be wrong. And I feel like for me, it was honestly like a humbling experience to know that like I might actually be wrong about this, because I was just having like a really hard conversation with someone a few weeks ago, and I was asking them, I was like, do I do this? Like, how do you view me when I react this way? Because I can be a very reactionary person, especially if something rubs me the wrong way or if I disagree on something. I can be very concrete but I take all of my experiences that I've learned and developed to be so concrete about something. And then every now and then I'll get like a kick to be like, Sam, you might be wrong, buddy. Like, you might be wrong about this. And then I have to like go back and be like, I'm sorry. Like, I'm sorry for the way I reacted, or I was overreactionary. But on the other end of that piece, the love for humanity, I think, is such a crucial thing, because I think and this is kind of like one of the journeys I'm on, is experiencing like, you might be doing some things that are really, really great, but you might not be doing other things that aren't so great. But I know I am doing great things, and then there might be things that I'm not doing as great. So how do you build that partnership to have hope for each other, to go, it's like a puzzle. Like, you have some pieces, I have some pieces. Let's bring this together and see what it looks like, instead of being so concrete on something. Now, there are things in scripture that are solid.
Your life can also, I might have an idea about something and I might think like, man, I'm onto something.
Yeah.
And you sometimes it takes time to iron it out. And, several of the things that I wrote about, it's like, this was tested over and over and over. I can't but think it's not real. And I can't, because when I lean into what I believe the truth of it is, like, things change. Like, hope rises, like prosperity surfaces.
Yeah.
It's not like everything always goes my way. I don't mean that, because I feel like that's kind of how we view hope as a kid.
Yeah.
Right. I hope I get ice cream after dinner.
Right. I hope I get this Christmas gift. Or,
right.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's all tied to getting my way.
Yeah.
And it's like, not everything is about me.
Right.
And I don't always get my way. If we could just resolve that at like when we're 12.
Yeah.
Like, that would be, it would help your life a lot, right? Yeah. And, but there are times when you do get your way, and things do work out in your favor. And I feel like all those spaces in between are not less important, but sometimes we give those big moments way more space.
Yeah.
And I think of like all the little moments I have actually help to create the strength for every day. It helps me to create, a greater positivity for things, a greater outlook for things, to shift my perspective. I renovate houses. I've been doing that for about 5 years now. And so I remember one day this house that we had bought was a big hot mess, and it was nasty.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm cleaning windows, and I'm like steaming them. I mean, it's nasty. And I'm washing it, and I have this thought. Now, I would normally say I heard this voice or I heard this whatever, but so I had this thought. Your perspective's only as good as the lens you look through.
Yes.
And I was like, I was like, I mean, logically that makes sense, but I was like, okay, so what are some things that we could look through? Fear, anger, resentment, shame, rejection, disappointment. That literally makes me not be able to see.
Yeah, it could fog everything up.
It fogs everything up, you know, and it's like, I put in the back of the book, I have like, kind of some journal entries that I call them journal entries because they're like real life moments like that, where I was like, oh, I just had this revelation. Like Holy Spirit just spoke to me like, wait, what?
Mm-hmm.
I'm just washing a window, going about life, doing my job. And I have just pop in random thought.
Light bulb.
Yeah. And I was like, whoa, how have these things impacted you?
Okay.
How have they impacted your decision making and your relationships and how you know, what you're doing or not doing? And so when I have like moments like that, you know, over the years, like I'll write things down or, you know, Instagram, like whatever. And so I took screenshots of all those things and put them in the back of the book.
Yeah, I saw
kind of like a,
of that.
hey, this is real. Like this is real life.
Yeah.
Like this is how hope can speak in your life. It doesn't have to be like some monumental, huge thing. It's like everyday moments that when I can recognize it, it literally impacts everything.
Yeah.
Because now I'm aware of something I wasn't before.
Yeah. And
that creates more prosperous pathways for things in my future. But I was just present in the moment.
Yeah. That's good. I like that. One other insert you put, until you partner with hope, poverty will have the loudest voice. So poverty isn't only just money, riches. Poverty is the way we think, the way we process, what we feel like we are living in, and how we communicate to ourselves, you know? So when you're, say someone is really struggling with hope, say they're really having like a really bad week or a bad day even, I feel like it's really easy for us to draw on the negative instead of looking for the positive of things, because humans are emotional and like humans are humans. So in somebody who, let's say, who would be experiencing that, what are, again, based on your writings and your experience, what are keys, if you will, that can help someone kind of like rewire their functionality to go, you know what? Let's look at hope. Like, this might be my situation, but I'm going to refuse to look at it from a poverty mindset and operate from a hope-filled mindset. Yeah.
I think journaling is really important because recognizing when you feel a certain way helps to rewire, because it helps you to see what you're thinking, you know, and maybe you come back to it a week later and you're like, oh, dang. And you might still agree with that, or you might see it differently and be like, man, I was really like, you know, or, you know, and it's just like, I think because we have a lot of thoughts really fast and we're in our emotions a lot, everything seems high stakes and everything's a big deal. Yeah. And it's just not. Right. But it feels like it. Yeah. You know, and so I think journaling can really help. And I was just telling a teenager recently, I was like, do you have any friends that you can just share with? And she was like, yeah, this one friend, but like, I don't know why I share with her because she doesn't even give me any good advice. And I was like, but what you want is to let it out. Yeah. And I was like, how about you just voice vomit into your phone? Because I was like, do you journal? No, not really. I'm like, that's okay. You don't have to write. Just let it out and come back later. And so I think that can be a tool for people. Like I said earlier, like recognizing lies. I have like a lie detector kind of little test. It's not like a test, but it's like some questions to ask yourself to help rewire.
Mm.
Another one is how to recognize when it's heaven's perspective versus yours, or what I would call having a earthbound perspective versus a heaven perspective. The Bible says that we are seated in heavenly places and that we are victorious. But how many times have I went through an experience and I didn't feel any of that?
Right.
You know, I felt defeated. I felt victimized. I felt abandoned, abused, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
I couldn't see from any other perspective.
Yeah.
You know, and so I think being able to go through some of those steps helps to rewire that stuff. You know, and the quote that you mentioned earlier about trick your brain.
Yeah.
That came from Dr. Joe Dispenza. He's a neuroscientist.
Oh, okay.
Love his work. He's got tons of podcasts, books, and stuff. But he says through the research, I love when research, confirms what like the spirit soul side of the world says.
Oh my gosh, yes.
You know, and so a lot of their research does that, and I'm just like, yes, loving this, you know. And he said by the time you are, I think 30, I'm not sure, I wrote it down, but you are a memorized set of what do you say, 95% of your thoughts are the same thoughts as the day before.
Whoa.
And that's exactly what I said. I was like, wait, what? But then I started taking note of my days and my thoughts, and I was like, I think that's right.
Huh.
And if I want a different outcome and my thoughts are connected to my actions, how would I ever think something's going to change? We have to rewire our brains. And then he talks about like being on an autopilot program by the time we're like 30 years old, 35 years old, with a set of memorized programs that we just do. We don't even think about, you know.
Yeah.
You know, we've all been in that, like, I drove here, but I don't remember any of the drive.
Yeah.
Or I get up, I do this, but I don't actually consciously think about doing it. I just do it.
Yeah.
You know, and we do that with our emotions. We do that with all kinds of things. And so part of his whole thing is like trick your brain. And I started to, so that you can reclaim your life and not be on an autopilot program, that you can form the life you want to live, you know? And so some of that list that you pointed out earlier, like I've done most of those things. Like I'm the person who's like, find the one thing on the item I like and order that every time.
Yeah.
You know, but what I realized is a lot of that came out of poverty.
Okay.
Like limited finances or survival of sorts, where I thought, I want to make sure I know I like it.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to get the same thing, because if I don't, then I'm not sure I'm going to be able to make myself eat it. And, you know, it all came back to a level of poverty, and where I wasn't willing to experiment anymore. And so I wouldn't order a new thing. Yeah. Which seems so silly, but it works. It works, and people do it all the time. Yeah. And so I started ordering things I wouldn't normally order. And I'm like, I'm going to try that new food. I'm going to do this over here. And I did this for weeks. Okay. And I was like, take that, brain. You didn't see that coming, you know? I'm taking back my life. Yeah. And it was really liberating, and a different sense of enjoyment and wonder, rather than like just running on autopilot all the time.
Do you feel like people are afraid to challenge themselves today because they like safe? They like
comfortable is
comfortable is the word. Yeah. So do you think people, I mean, I'm sure, again, talking to myself here,
Same.
I think for me at least, I know there's a lot of things that I'd just rather remain comfortable in instead of challenging myself to advance not only like my thoughts or emotions, but like advance my entire being to excel in new areas. Do you think people struggle with the concept of hope and pursuing that?
Yeah, because I think they're afraid of disappointment
Yeah.
because it's has such a loud, impactful, it just resounds so loudly,
Yeah.
And so I think that it takes intentionality.
Right.
And, there's times that I've had to, I think having goals is really important, but I think having more than goals, vision is, and I think they can be the same, but I think of, vision for my life is the big picture, and goals is what gets me there.
Okay.
And so whatever that could be, I have a vision to, raise my kids a certain way. I have a vision for my marriage. I have a vision for things I'd like to accomplish, whatever. Place I'd want to go and, so on. I can't get there without action steps, without doing something.
Right.
I don't just get to show up and it just magically happened.
Right.
And I think that's the misconception that so many people have.
Yeah.
They just want to show up. And sometimes that works in certain cases, but I mean, in most cases, like it's going to require something.
Yeah.
And it's usually going to be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And because if it was comfortable, everyone would be doing it.
Right.
And
everybody would be hugging and celebrating one another,
Yeah. Yeah. And that's just not happening,
right. Yeah.
So I do think there is a level of, I think that people can break through it though.
Yeah. 100%.
But I do think it takes
like a wanting.
It takes a wanting, yeah. And it takes a belief that you can. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like the I am statements. It's like I can. The final chapter in the book is about parenting.
Okay.
Plan to write a parenting book in the future.
Okay.
And so, but in that, it's that I can, and there's a whole list of things. And it's like, as parents, we want to be able to do certain things, but sometimes we just don't believe we can. Mm-hmm. We do that across the board, outside of parenting,
Oh, yeah.
It's like, I want to, but can I? And it's like, if you can't first start with the belief, I'm not sure how you get there. You have to work on your belief first. Yeah. And you have to rewire that. And because, I mean.
And it makes me think, and not, when you say belief, it's not, belief is not like if you believe in Jesus or if you believe in Holy Spirit. Belief is in, you're speaking like yourself.
Believe in ability, like
believe
in possibility, I guess.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Like believe that it could be possible.
Yeah. Because I'm just saying that because you don't have to be a Christian or believe in God to experience hope. And it's kind of like the same thing, like just belief, if you can do it, you know?
And that's the thing, like everybody experiences hope, but you can connect in deeper ways. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's where Jesus comes in. Like when I was in high school, I had one of my cosmetology teachers. She really invested into me and just really encouraged me. And she never talked about Jesus. Mm-hmm. I don't even know if I knew she was a Christian. Later in life, figured out she was, but what she did is she spoke life over me. Yeah. And she encouraged me. And when I look back, I'm like, whoa, like hope was speaking through her the whole time and made sure I got the message, even though I couldn't recognize it as hope itself. But once I accepted hope for myself, accepted Jesus for myself, it was like I had full access. Before that, I had like limited access. Okay. And now I have my direct connection. Yeah. It doesn't have to go through someone else all the time. Yeah. And I think that can be the difference maker, because like the Bible says that Jesus isn't a respecter of people. He sees everybody. Mm-hmm. He's not going, after one's more important than the other. Right. And I'm like, and in order to, receive that connection that's available, it just starts with belief. There's nothing, no magical something, but it's like we were talking about like bands the other day, and some song came on. They're like, you guys don't know this? And I was like, how old are you? And they were a little older than me. And I was like, no, at this time I was listening to this. I was listening to like Aerosmith and like all this. And he was like, what? And we realized we were about 10 years apart.
Okay.
But I was like, I could believe in that band. I could believe in their music. I could believe in whatever. But it's not until I get into a close proximity do I have actual access to them.
Yeah.
It's like I just had the residual.
Yeah.
And I'm like Jesus offers us full access so that we can be in connection all the time. And we don't have to always get it through someone else like I got it through my teacher. Now, we can still get it that way, yes. Right. But who doesn't want full access to stuff?
Right.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, that's so true. I want to circle back real quick. So in mentioning like, you know, to write things down or record yourself. 6 years ago, I was doing like a mentor session and I was going through a really hard time. It was not a good time. And we were going through Zoom and he's like, here's what I think you should do. And I was like, okay. He's like, just record yourself. He's like, you have the gear, you have the things, like you know it'll look great. He's like, but just record yourself, kind of like a journal entry. It was like a journal recording. And he was like, you should video yourself too, just talking, expressing, just get it out. And I was like, all right, I'll do it if you think it'll help. And sure enough, I still have the video to this day. And it makes me cringe, like so cringy, because I'm sharing and expressing like all these hard things that are going on and happening. And I don't know what to do or why it's happening. And sure enough, it was like 6 months later, maybe I was going through my folders and that video popped. I was like, oh, I don't know if I want to watch that. Sure enough, I clicked on it and like it was kind of like one of those, right? Because I don't remember what I said, I don't remember what I was feeling, but sure enough, I was like, oh my gosh, like you were such a hot mess. Like, why did you believe those things? Why did you, experience that? And so to say all that, it was like that's another outlet that people can do if they're fine with it, and not to like blast it over social media, like it's your own journal entry. Right. And I actually encouraged an older lady who was going through a hard time, and we were just talking. It was at my church, and it was probably like after a Sunday or seminar, prophetic seminar or something, and we were just talking. I was like, you should try this. And she did. She went home that evening, tried it, and it was like maybe 3 or 4 months later, she came back and she was like, do you remember you told me to do that? And I was like, I do. She goes, oh my gosh. She's like, I can't believe I was in that state of belief of where I thought I was at and stuff. And so, all that to say, record yourself. If you're a visual person like I am, it puts things into a whole new perspective of reality. Yeah. And I
also like it timestamps things.
It does. Yeah.
Because then you can see progress. Mm-hmm. And I think that sometimes we feel like everything is always going so slow and taking so long. Yeah. And we just have like the big picture in mind, the big things in mind, and we don't see the progress of all the little things that are getting us there. And so I love like the timestamps, because I'll be like, it was only that long ago, right? Or
yep.
It feels like it was like just yesterday.
Yep. Yeah, that's true. Acknowledging our disappointments empowers us to pivot with purpose.
Yeah.
So it makes me think again of just like that video journal entry that I did. I was empowering with the disappointment that was happening in my life. Mm-hmm. So when people are struggling with disappointment, it really does take kind of like a revamp of what we feel is common, but isn't supposed to be common, to empower with purpose. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, I kind of think of like I said, I was at a graduation party yesterday and I'm talking to these teenage girls and I'm like, hey, they're just sharing all this drama. Right. And I'm just like, I'm in it with them. I'm like, I'm here for just to be a part of your life. Right. And I'm going to see where I can plant a seed and like, just encourage you. Yeah. Right. And I was just thinking, I hear what you're saying. I know that you think that like being out of high school is the answer. but how are we going to not repeat this in another environment?
Yeah.
Like, be that work or what, like, there's still drama. Like, there's still this.
Yeah.
How are we going to change that? And I just think, like, those are common things. When I worked in the salon, like, there was common things, right? People knowing everybody's business and talking about things. And I was like, I am not doing this. And I think you have to really know what you're willing to say no to, and like really take note of how it's impacting your life when you do participate. You know, it's like if you recognize that you're more stressed when you're on social media and your anxiety goes up, well, maybe you should get off.
Yeah.
Maybe you should take a break for a while.
Yeah.
You know, there could be all kinds of things, but I think being able to recognize it and say, I just think that's really key.
Is recognizing
that how things impact you.
Yeah.
And not just think it's always everybody else's fault.
Yeah.
Like, you know, we can, in this case, I'm like, you could not respond. Like, that's a real thing.
Yeah.
I know it's common to respond.
Yeah.
Right away. And like, why aren't they texting me back? Maybe they have a life. Maybe they have a job.
Right.
Like, maybe there could be a million things of why not.
Right.
But it's not. I don't think it doesn't seem to be healthy to always have an instant response, which means that person is always available and always on, like, it's just constant distraction.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm like, it's just noise. And so, you know, I just think, like, you have to realize when you are, like, what are patterns in your life? That's what I was thinking about earlier when you're talking, like, what are the patterns? Like, there's always patterns to everything. So, like, if I'm feeling this type of way, what are the things that probably led me get that feeling?
Yeah.
You know, and like, know that you have the power to change those things.
Right.
And I just think sometimes we're in this, we have this concept that, like, I can't do anything about it. And that's just a lie.
Yeah.
Like, we are capable of so much more than we give ourselves credit for.
Right.
And we really can activate the strength within us, the patience within us, the courage within us to make changes that then we're so proud we made, you know, and that help to create the life we want to live in.
Yeah. Self-achievements.
Yeah.
Right? It makes me think of that, just those two words. Self-achievements help build and encourage the belief in our life to operate in hope more effectively and profoundly.
Yeah.
But not just for us, but for other people that we do life with. That's so cool. That's very fun. Well, tell people where you can they can get your book.
They can get it on my website at monarchmovement.co or on Amazon.
Oh, okay. Very cool.
You know, easily accessible.
Connecting Beyond the Encounter. Tania Stentz.
Yeah.
Very cool. Do you want to plug in any of your socials? How do people find you on socials?
Go to my website.
Go to our website. And that is, what was your website again?
Monarchmovement.co.
Monarchmovement.co.
Yeah.
Okay.
I love technology and what it can do, but you know,
it's technology.
I have a whole full life. So, you know, someday if I can hire someone to, like, just make it all happen.
Right. Yeah.
That'd be great. But I am on Instagram. I am on Facebook. You know, so a little bit of book, hope, life, a little bit of family.
Yeah.
Just
that's cool.
Living life.
Is there any final words you want to say before we wrap this up?
Yeah.
Words of inspiration.
Yeah. I would say, wherever you're at in life, know that there is more and that hope is on your side.
I love it. Very cool. Well, as always, go to bearsdon'tfly.com for all the socials and all things. Subscribe to YouTube, Facebook, Spotify, Instagram, TikTok, all the things. So this has been so fun, and I'm very appreciative that you came on the show. It was a good time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Perfect.
Super fun.
Awesome. That is very cool.